We're approaching 1,500 videos on the channel. That's just bananas. It made me realize that I've been riding bikes and making content about bikes for the better half of my adult life. So in this video, I wanted to share with you guys some things I've learned, some things I wish I could tell my younger self. And honestly, it's gonna be a little bit all over the map. Some is technical advice, some is general cycling life advice, and also advice as being a bike content creator. Fair warning, this video won't have any advice about training or racing. So if that's the kind of cycling tips or advice you want, this is probably not the video for you. Let's get into it. This is a list of some of the things I've learned about bikes, life, and bike YouTube. One piece of advice I want to give my younger self is to go now. Don't save your dreams for a big bike trip for some future retirement. It's going to seem crazy to sell everything you own in your early 30s and go touring for 2 or 3 years, essentially cashing in your prime earning years for some prime living years, but you will not regret it. There's going to be a pandemic. There's going to be illness. There's going to be all sorts of challenges as you get older that fortunately you're free of now. And who knows, when you get to that age where you've given yourself permission to finally go on a bike tour, you might not be physically able, and it might actually not be what you want to do at that life stage. The most important thing on the bike is how well it fits you. It doesn't matter how expensive the bike is, how fancy the components are. It could be your dream bike, but if it doesn't fit you well, it's just going to be painful. You're going to have all this existential doubt, and it just won't be a good time. So definitely prioritize bike fit over everything else. Expensive bike components, specifically shifters, are way overrated. Don't get sucked into the hype. It's still all moving a rear derailleur a couple of millimeters, and it's ultimately up to you to decide how much you want to pay for those like millimeters of movement. Range is more important than the number of speeds. Your bike could have 30 speeds, but if those 30 speeds aren't within the range that work for your style of riding, then it's kind of pointless. You'll want to lower gear more often than you'll want higher gear. There's going to be like a few circumstances where you wish you had that higher gear. Maybe you're trying to outsprint a dog on a downhill with a tailwind, but more often than not, you're going to find yourself at the end of your cassette wanting a lower gear. Stay weird. The hardest thing in bikes and in life in general is to be your true self. The world is in a conspiracy to make you conform into neat little boxes. Stay weird. It's going to be one of your best assets. Back to gearing. Low gears are okay. Most bikes come over geared. The thing about low gears is that it gives you superhuman strength to go up stupid steep things while carrying a big load. So if you want low gears, don't feel bad about it. Stock gearing on most curly bikes assume you're going to ride it unloaded, that the bike is fairly lightweight, and it's going to assume a certain level of fitness already. And that might not be you, and that's perfectly okay. If you want low gears, don't feel ashamed about it, but you will have to find a bike shop or mechanic that will entertain this notion and give you what you actually want, which is a bit of a sad state of affairs. It's better to know this early on, but the bike industry is essentially run by jocks. The industry won't get excited about something unless there is an event or you can somehow race it. Take, for example, bike touring. Probably the nerdiest, frittiest thing that the bike industry paid very little attention to until ultra racing. So unfortunately, that's kind of the lay of the land. Ride all the bikes. Ride road, ride mountain, ride fixed, ride BMX. There's something to be learned from every kind of discipline. Beware of mediocre frames with higher end components. Again, too many people focus on the brand names or the model names of the components on the bike without looking at what's actually important. Things like bike fit, the geometry of the bike, is it going to handle like you want it to? Don't be fooled just because the bike says Shimano Durace or SRAM Red, that's actually a good bike for you. You're not going to make everybody happy, and you're not here to make everybody happy. You're also not here to be another GCN, and no one can out GCN. You're going to have to figure out what it is about you that can't be replicated, irreproducible, and unique, and focus on that. No one is more qualified to tell your story than you are. Bike pedals, know how to tighten them and loosen them correctly. On the right side, the drive side, it's righty tighty, lefty loosey. On the non-drive side, it is the opposite direction. One easy way to remember this is if you want to tighten the pedals of your bike, turn them towards the front of the bike. And if you want to loosen the pedals, turn them to the rear of the bike. And footnote, bottom brackets are the complete opposite. If you're using BSA bottom brackets, of course. Spend more money on your wheels and your tires. The tires are the only part of the bike that touch the ground and will make the biggest difference. They'll affect how your bike handles, how it accelerates, what kind of terrain you can ride on. Don't spend it on expensive shifting. Just don't do it. Bike design is a game of millimeters and degrees. Small things do make a difference, but at the same time, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. You can have your preferences, but again, if the trail figure is off by like 5 millimeters, don't sweat it. Don't trust straight lines on the map, especially if you're riding through the mountains. That usually means it's just going to go straight up a hill and is following a power line. That's going to be one heck of a hike-a-bike or a crazy descent. Don't trust wiggly lines on the map. That usually means there's some kind of obstacle, either a river or a hill to navigate around, and that usually means climbing or descending. Whenever a road or a trail crosses a blue line that signifies water, that usually means there's going to be a hill involved because you're going to have to descend into the water and ride out of it. If there are no topo lines on the map, that's a good way to figure out where the hills are. There will never be enough bikes. Even after testing over 100 bikes, there's always going to be one in the horizon that you're going to be lusting after. Simply put, there's no perfect bike for everyone that will work for all people in all abilities at all times and all stages of their life. So if someone ever says that this bike is perfect, you have to ask for whom. Most mainstream bikes are designed for tall people with really long legs. So if you're a shorter person, you're kind of screwed. It's not you, it's them. Spend less time about worrying commenters and just ban or hide them. I wish I had done this early on. It would have saved me a ton of grief. Don't buy the cheap stuff if you can avoid it, because oftentimes you'll still be lusting after the more expensive version and will slowly spin your way up to there. So like they say, buy it nice or buy it twice or thrice. Don't do things just because a pro does it. The bike industry is notorious for putting pros on literal pedestals and using them as a paradigm to which we should all aspire to. But the truth is, they're young, they're flexible, they're fit, they're racing for money, and people ride bikes for so many other reasons than just that. So just because a pro does it, again, unless you're racing for money, doesn't mean you should do the same thing. You're not a lifeless machine to just be optimized. It's okay to ride bikes just for fun, with no metrics, no measuring, no trying to prove yourself for your next ride. Learn to enjoy the ride you're on for its own sake. Flat pedals are perfectly fine and are severely underrated. On the flip side, the necessity of clipless pedals for everyone who rides a bike is severely overrated. Commuting by bike is the most underrated form of cycling and has the potential to do the most good for the world, the environment, your community, yourself, but it's also the least appreciated by the bike industry at large. You can be in the middle of nowhere, but as you approach a blind hill, that's when two cars will converge just as you're about to crest it. In the same vein, you can be in the middle of nowhere, and when you pull out your camera to take a photo, that's when all the cars will appear. No one will magically save you. You're going to operate for many years, producing content, taking photos, hoping you'll get noticed by some brand that'll swoop up and give you a pile of money. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to figure out a different way, and it's just easier if you operate on that assumption. When you're going on a ride or a tour and there's a big looming mountain to overcome, there's this great saying that the only way to eat an elephant is one forkful at a time. Break up these big obstacles into bite-sized morsels and focus on that and don't get overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. And there's another great saying, I believe it's a Haitian saying, but behind mountains are more mountains. There's always going to be something else, another obstacle after you overcome the one that you're on. In the end, we all ride party pace. When you realize that the metrics don't matter and all there is to enjoy the wind in your hair, the sound of your tires on the tarmac or the gravel, and just enjoy the ride. If you guys have been enjoying the videos, there's almost 1,500 of them at this point. Please join us on Patreon. It's what keeps the channel going. We're a bit of an oddball in the cycling industry, or tangential to the cycling industry. We're not the kind of channel or cyclist that brands typically sponsor. So that's why we've always gone direct to you guys, either through the Patreon or buying some merch. Every bit helps. And as always, keep the supple side down.